Hello, everybody. Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and missing Phoenix Lords to that 6+++ show. I am your host, Tom. I'm back once again with the lovely nerds of the 6++ team to think all things Warhammer 40k with you today. And we're talking list writing, and we've got a very special guest. It's a wonderful man who we're all massive fans of, who knows a thing or two about designing lists and playing to his strengths. It is, of course, the wonderful Vijay of 40k Fireside.
Sound effects.
That's right. This is what real YouTube channels do, Vic. We've got
Brilliant.
all the sound effects.
Yeah. Brilliant. Step up our game.
Vic, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm good, Tom. Thank you so much for having me on
That's really
once
exciting.
again.
Yes, no, it's an absolute delight. I thought it'd be fun to get you on for a main show because I've had you on for lots of state of plays and stuff. You can be a bit more fun and silly and relaxed with the main show, which I think is nice. You know, you don't have to spell out all the secrets of Sisters of Battle or something for an hour, so it'll give you a nice rest. And obviously, we'll come back to you in just a moment. But obviously, 40k Fireside having an incredible year, so there's loads of exciting stuff to talk about there. So very much looking forward to unpacking that. I will just briefly introduce the other less glamorous members of my team. He gets very cross when I introduce someone else first. It is my dear leader, Chris. Chris, how are you doing?
Yeah, not great, Tom, now.
You've been better. Is my favoritism showing?
Yeah, slightly. I'm very well, thank you, Thomas. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. The truth is, I got back from the ITT and then I was just sick for 7 days. I got a horrible bug. And we also had pyro prep to do. So I basically, when I've been able to function, it's been a bit of TTS, and then it's basically been lying down. That's the honest truth of my
TTS and lying down. It's the dream, right?
TTS and lying down, and actually, for some war games have made a career out of that, as far as I understand. So I think it's a model that can work, but it's not for me. So what have you been up to, Chris?
Well, I have actually done some painting.
Yes, you have. Tell us about that.
Shocking turn of events, actually Space Marines. Because it's a long story, but basically my relationship with Space Marines isn't great. I've had many Space Marine armies and sold every single one, but I'm doing some Blood Angels.
You are.
Obviously.
So what shade of red did you go with for your Blood Angels?
Well, I went for that really well-known red that is blue-green, because it'd be I can't really not have an army that isn't blue-green.
It's the only thing. Isn't it?
Yeah. If you look really hard, there's a Blood Angel successor chapter called the Atlantean Spears. It's a beautiful blue, green, and gold.
Accurate.
Yeah, accurate. His sound went. Chris, where's the sound go?
It's gone underwater.
Uh-oh. You back now?
No.
Still with the Atlanteans.
Oh, it's cut his sound off. How bizarre.
How bizarre.
Whilst Chris figures that little puzzle out, John, he's back. No, he's back. Okay, that's fine. John almost had to talk there for a second.
Oh, no.
That would be awful. I don't know. Connected my...
Did you hit your cable somehow?
Maybe.
We saw that bang of the table with
Let's
excitement.
not dwell on it. You're back with us now.
Oh, yeah, I was basically just saying that I've got a nice airbrush scheme. No like highlights or washes or anything. Just trying quick and simple. But although I've got a really good airbrush, my airbrushing skills not so much. So I haven't actually managed to get the shade and the contrast I was hoping for. So I've just gone down the line of fuck it, let's weather the shit out of this thing and just cover it with a sponge. And it actually looks all right.
The weathering actually looks really good. Yeah.
Go check out our Instagram page, 6++ Gaming, and the most recent post is my beautiful Atlantean Spear jump pack intercessor.
Yeah, 100%. No, really look forward to looking at that. I'm sure it's very good. And I'm sure, like all the Space Marine armies you and I have started over the years, you will use it a lot.
100%.
Because if I know anything, it's that when you and me start a Space Marine army,
it goes really well.
We sure play that thing at some point. It
definitely one day.
Oh yeah. Speaking of someone who does play Space Marine armies, my sensei is here. John Scrivo, how are you doing?
Well, I've been a bit busy not doing hobby stuff, building websites.
Yes, you have.
Setting up packs, you name it. But I have managed to find some time to do the really sensible and healthy thing of duplicating units I already have in my army.
Okay.
So all my intercessors now have robes because I've been getting Crusader squads, so just ripping them apart and making them the right chapter.
Okay.
And then I thought, that I can't just draw the line there. So I've now got Blade Guard made out of Sword Brethren as well, which is just
that's very cool.
Another layer of like, oh God, what am I doing to myself? But I'm really enjoying it, which is terrifying because I'm just now going to have to do it to everything.
Yeah, John's dedication to Dark Angels is very real. At Christmas, when all the Christmas boxes came out, he got the Dark Angels one when he already had everything in it. That's how in love.
I now have
he is.
6 units of the new Deathwing Knights because now I can have 3 with swords and 3 with maces. It's completely
And
reasonable,
if
right?
they ever change that unit cap back and ruin all of our lives, you can.
I'll be ready.
You'll be there. Absolutely.
It's
All right.
completely fine, right?
What we're going to do then is we're going to jump into the chat and say hello. Then we're going to quickly do a tiny bit of self-promotion, shout a couple of things out. Then we're going to learn all about 40k Fireside and their big year. And we're going to do list writing. We're going to talk all things list writing. And if you have questions for Vic, chat, please do chuck them in. We would love to hear from you. So in the chat, we have William Lovell says, pulling in the big guns. Yeah, absolutely. Scrivo is on this show, William Lovell. Very cool. Picolax is also here. Picolax is asking, is Scrivo having a rave? Yeah, there is some pretty shocking.
Yeah, you've gone for a different background today, Scrivo.
It's like it's on a timer, right? It's cycling round.
I'm in a different room, so I actually have fancy lights. It's amazing.
Phenomenal.
Let's pop up a warning for
That's
epilepsy.
the big, yeah.
So I'm just going to go back to the jungle because that looks the most Dark Angel-y. I'm in Caliban again.
I think so. Chris Cad was in. Hello, Chris Cad. Rob Kimpton's in. Hello, Rob Kimpton. Donald Cowie asks, is there a difference of writing a GT list versus a narrative army list?
I bloody hope so.
That's actually a really fun
Not
question.
for me.
Well,
No, I was going to say not for Vic. Not for Vic. Vic nails it. Sam Dunn says hello all as well. Welcome everybody. Yeah, and the key thing is, even if it is a comp list, you have to say it's narrative. That's very important.
So your last narrative event win, Tom?
Yes.
Was that a GT list as well?
It was a very narrative,
but thematic, right?
Yeah, it was a story all about 3 abominants that had got together and found some aberrants and just gone on a little adventure together to hit some people with hammers. And look, what a time they had! It was
hammered that point home.
It was a very very thematic list. There was a mad scientist in there leading them all. It was beautiful.
Perfect.
Start hitting 3.
Read the novel.
Yeah.
So it's a circle, is what you're saying. Cool.
Yeah. No, I definitely overstepped the mark on that one. I told you I was gonna. I was like, I think this time I'm just gonna kill everyone. Okay, so J Meld is in. Hello, J Meld. Okay, so just taking it briefly to a self-promotional place. We have a couple of very exciting things. I'm going to rattle through them very quickly. The first, of course, is that our event happening March is still down to its last few tickets. Is it not, Chris?
Yep, absolutely. So 15th and 16th of March, all the goodie bag stuff's happening. We've just finished the first draft of the tournament pack. It's WTC Terrain. It's a live streamed event. You get one hell of a goodie bag. We've got a prize draw as well. Loads and loads of prizes. I think there's like 12 different prizes or something like that. And tickets are £65. If you go to our Facebook page, you'll see the Facebook event there. Keen to get those final few tickets sold as soon as possible, guys.
Yeah, come
looking up a really good field. Really good
absolutely.
field.
And then just on the other business side of things, it's just a little reminder. It's been announced a couple of times on other videos, but the wonderful Ed Watts has stepped up to join us for 40k coaching and mentoring now. So Ed, as Vic can attest, is a beautiful maverick of a man and certainly knows his way around 40k. And it also writes some lovely innovative lists as well. You'll have seen him out there taking Anvil Siege Force to a shock 59% win rate globally now, which I think is about 50% Ed's doing, which is pretty cool. So if you're interested in learning and working with Ed, or indeed with myself or Chris, get in touch via YouTube or Discord. We're more than happy to work with you. And finally, as Nightbot in the chat is saying, don't mess with Nightbot because he'll get you. Do sign up as a YouTube member if you're interested in supporting us that way. We hit 100 members for the first time, which was really, really exciting. So thank you to everyone who's done that. And obviously that unlocks all sorts of things in Discord for you as well. And like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff as well, if not. I think that's the primary things for now. We've been a bit sick and tired, so there's been slightly less videos this week, but that'll all be back on very, very soon. Is Nightbot now asking questions in the chat? That's got me very. that's got me very worried.
This AI is getting out of hand.
That's actually very, very concerning. Nightbot is asking the most busted codex you didn't know you wanted.
That's Moth. That's the Moth.
Yeah, that's the Moth command does that, Tom.
Don't
worry.
That's fun. Okay, so Nightbot terrifies me, as everyone knows. So I've got
It's the best.
What's going on with that? I wish we'd never got Nightbot. It scares the absolute shit out of me. Yeah, Codex Moth, when we write it, will be the most powerful codex ever designed, without doubt. Probably Tyranids, right? Got to be Tyranids. Okay, let's do it. Let's talk all things list writing. But first, Vic, in case people don't know you, and I'm very confident they do you want to just talk a little bit about 40k Fireside and all the amazing things you've been doing this year?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the chance to say that. Before I do that, though, I want to give a shout out to you, Tom. Because I've had a few people message me who are getting coaching with you, who have said how amazing you are as a coach. So there you go. There's my plug to you.
That's incredibly sweet. Thank you.
Clip that. We'll clip that and just have that on the feed on the list.
That's about as high an honor as I can get. So thank you.
There's a bit of overlap there because these people are people who've joined up to the Fireside membership, and our channel's kind of grown at a similar time to you guys are really how you guys are really taking off with this. It is so good to give back to the community, and 40k Fireside is something that me and David Gaylard run. If you guys haven't checked it out, we do a lot of content on kind of very competitive 40k, but trying to give back the core concepts of what everyone can do to be a little bit better at 40k. And we've kind of expanded that a little bit with our YouTube membership, the Discord server. We both have faction speciality, particularly in Eldar and Guard, which is kind of convenient at the moment. So a lot of people have been jumping in to try and see where we are with our list design and stuff like that. Me and Dave did a TTS game, and we're trying to do a bit more stuff like that as well. So if you are interested, type in 40k Fireside into YouTube and just see what it's about. If you want more details, want deep dives on list design, which is kind of what we're talking about today, then the membership side has a lot of that in a lot of detail too.
100%, really, really exciting, and obviously, Fireside's been an absolute staple of mine for a very, very long time. Dave and Vic are fantastic. It's as you say, it's a top expert level opinion, but it's put across in a way that's very, very immediate and easy to understand, and also just fun, right, to listen to and enjoy as well. So I think you guys do an incredible job at kind of getting that view across. And if you are keen on information on Eldar and Guard right now, I don't think there's a better place you can go. I really don't. I think you want to get in there and get involved. So absolutely get over to their Discord. And then Sam Dunn says, Vic, your Codex Tower review was excellent and cost me a lot of money. So I don't know what that was about.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, dear.
I don't know.
Lawsuit.
What's going on?
Being filed.
Oh, man. Wonderful. Okay, fantastic. Right, so what we're going to do today is, as I say, something Vic's already alluded to, is I think so much of doing 40k well and competing well in games is actually settled long before the game itself is played, right? And it's at this pernickety level of list design and coming up with interesting concepts to play the game, but also coming up with lists that can tackle a bunch of stuff out there. 40k is a complicated game, and ultimately your list is your first and best chance of being ready for whatever is out there at a given moment in time. So it's really, really important to get that right. And obviously the very best players in the world, like yourself, Vic, repeatedly find new ways to do this and come at the game with interesting lists and keep sort of pushing the envelope forwards, if you will. So I think this is an amazing topic to have you on for. It was exactly who I wanted to get for it. So I think what I'd suggest to begin with is we open up with just a bit of a general lead into how you've sort of developed your thinking about list writing over however many years you've played now, a long time. And then we'll start picking into some of the details and the minutiae, right? So do you want to give us a bit of an overview first, Vic, about list writing?
The history of it is such an interesting topic because I think the value and importance of list building has changed a lot over time. There was a period of time where the information sharing between people was much less. And you could almost go in with a massive advantage at a tournament if you just had a better list than everyone else. That variance has kind of reduced over time now. That actually I feel that list building and the list that you take to a tournament is not necessarily the most critical signifier if you're going to win or do well at the tournament anymore. Player skill and small technical details, your macro strategy, your micro strategy, all of these things are more important now. But all of these things still tie into how you build your list. I've seen a lot of people over time think, okay, I have to take the list that the best player is doing really well with. And there are times when this doesn't work. You can take players like Liam Viesel. He wins every single thing he goes to, but no one can use his list correctly. That's because in his head, he's thought, okay, I'm going to have this unit because this unit is going to do this thing. The core kind of science and art of list building is like intrinsically linked to your strategy and how you're going to do it.
100%.
So yeah, I think things have changed a lot. It used to be you just take as much of the best thing as possible, skew your list, mathematical optimization, and now it's changed to I need tools for every job to actually win my games.
Is that why Manny stopped playing?
Oh!
The timing.
Sorry, that's all I'm here for. Nick can talk. I'll just
Chris is bringing the dissenting voice today. I like it.
Manny's a great example of it, though. Actually,
Yeah.
I think, you mentioned in your little run-up the power of skew lists.
Yes.
And skew lists were much more of a big thing in the meta compared to how they are now. Now we tend to see much more balanced lists, whereas skew lists were lists where you could go to a tournament and be like, 90% of lists can't beat this. I'll manage the other 10%. Now you can't really do that because 50% of the lists will manage a skew list now, at least.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's really exciting. And as you say, actually, the key in list writing, as you say, is to have there's got to be a very genuine relationship between what you're putting in and the uses you're seeing and understanding for every component, right? And that's why, as you say, just picking up someone else's is tricky, because actually you're not going to have that immediate knowledge of what they're doing with all the different pieces. And that's, I say, VSL is a great example, because I say, like, his Vets of the Long War list is one of my favorite examples, where that thing simply has not succeeded in any other pair of hands, right? It's not done anything other than just casually win LGT. so like, that gives you some idea, right? Like,
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, Liam is phenomenal, but he's the perfect example of how you need to prioritize how good you are at the game, your play style, and matching your list to that correctly.
Yeah, completely. And so I think, as you say, then it becomes about what you want your lists to do and the things you need in the game, and it's definitely more a case, as you say now, of needing to build all of those tools into apply good macro and micro strategy. So I think probably then let's unpack that a little bit and start thinking about, and we can open this up to the other guys as well, if we're thinking about ingredients that you want in a 10th list now, what are the things that when you're sitting down to start writing a brand new list, you're like, I must have these different dimensions? What are the go-tos? And obviously, if you want to use faction examples, that's wonderful as well.
Yeah, I think Dave is the perfect example of this. Dave is a robot. He's a machine. Everything he writes is completely understandable and coded in. I'm a little bit weird. I have a little bit of art. I'll take something funky in my list just to mix things up, keep things on edge. But Dave is beautiful for teaching these concepts, because he works on this kind of onion theory almost of macro strategy, where you have your core units that achieve the things you want, and then less and less important things as you go along. And to kind of unpack that a little bit, his concepts are around, you hold your primary at home, you have a unit for that. You hold your expansion objective, these 2-3 units do that. You have a few units which attack your opponent's expansion objective and reduce their primary. You have 2 or 3 units for that. You then have a number of units for attacking the middle of the board and scoring secondaries. And then as soon as you have these components in, then it's just about adding in the last outer layers of the onion to match maybe the most efficient ways of doing everything else. But that macro strategy for winning the game, because ultimately winning the game is not about killing your opponent, it's about having more points on the scorecard at the end of the game, is a very accessible strategy, I think, for people. And a lot of people build to that at the moment, I think.
I completely agree. And I think the point about the locations there, that's huge, and that's been a very big part of my 10th listing writing as well, is when you're putting a unit in, you are often thinking, where is that going to live? What is that running a flank? Is that going to pop up from reserves turn 3? Is that something I'm going to throw in the middle turn 1 to make someone come out? All these different units have jobs and locations that they're going to function, and actually the secondaries in the primary game in 10th is so tied to locations as well, that's a very useful way of thinking about it, right? And I think whenever if you're looking at this and trying to streamline them or fine tune them, that's a really good way of looking at it. If you're looking at it, you go, where does that even go? Like, where am I putting that? Like, what's that now in there for? Then you're like, oh, maybe that's something I don't need. Maybe I can swap that for something else. Chris, how about you? Any other kind of sort of fundamental ingredients you want when you're looking to?
I think it's a really interesting one, actually, because obviously that method works for certain armies, more so than others. So you take something like Guard, they have got that base, they've got the kind of the points to play with to be able to achieve all those things.
Yeah, they can have 3 for each of those roles.
Like if I tried to do that with my Grey Knights, it's like, this is quite tricky. So I think for me, I've tried loads of different ways. I have tried the I remember one point I did try with Elder, like, right, this unit's going to go here and this unit's going here, and what's the best unit I can have to go in these spaces? And I think very similarly to like Dave, like that is how I would like it to be in my brain. That would really, I'd love that. Unfortunately, I don't really play the armies that allow me to do that. Maybe I'm just playing the wrong army, but I play these armies which are a bit more like Eldar, GK, a bit more janky. Got to try and work your way around a bit more, and then it's obviously trying to find the most efficient way of doing kind of like multiple things. But I mean, I think like so my journey with Grey Knights has been very much just a really slow, steady progress of little tweaks. The more and more I play. I don't necessarily have a particular philosophy. I know what I guess I build lists that work for me. I guess would probably be my main bit of my thought process. Like so, for example, at Saffron Slam, I took 5 Dread Knights. I knew it probably wasn't for me, but I felt like it was a list that I might want to take to ITT. So therefore, I've got to go and give it a go. But actually, whenever I play, mainly because I've got more experience with it now, but I end up building lists that are going to do a bit of everything and have game into lots of things because I know how I want to play the game in that kind of like that hide and pick away at the edges and dive in. And so I will deliberately make choices. And then for me, the next step is then identifying the weaknesses. So for example, I identified the weakness of my Grey Knights that kept losing quarters missions because I couldn't ever hold my natural expansion objective. So then I put in like the Brotherhood Champion with the strikes, fight first, go up against the wall, try and get more primary on that objective. So it's like those sorts of tweaks, and it's more for me. This building is a process. I think what Vic said about lists working for certain people is just so important. Maybe if there was a Grey Knight list which was 6 Dread Knights and Annihilate, like when there was that famous 6 Dread Knight and 3 Land Raider list that we all loved, didn't we, Vic?
Oh no!
The Vic Vijay full one list,
and was it Manny as well?
It was Banny's fault.
Exactly, guys.
Blame the guy that's not here. That's
but I mean, if I took it, I would have done probably just as well as Vic and Manny, which wasn't that well. So this didn't really do. But I know for one that sort of list would not suit me at all. I'd be like trying to hide the Land Raiders behind walls and be, like that's sort of how I would play. So I guess my main list building philosophy is stick to how I want to play the game and try and play the game, help that fit that around.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scrivo, how about you? Any sort of fundamental ingredients you like to have?
So for me, I found for 10th edition, a lot of the time building Space Marine lists, I almost have like a template where I start out with 2 of these 2 units, so scouts, jump pack intercessors, a combi lieutenant. I have like this foundation that I will always start with.
Yeah, you got like a sort of.
I don't necessarily keep it all, but it's like I see if I can desperately get 2 of each of them in, and then if I do have to save some points, if the theme requires me to kind of save some points somewhere, I'll drop off a unit of scouts if need be, type of thing. But it's always a foundation that I start with.
And that sounds like utility, right? It sounds like you started with utility there.
So that's often I find, especially as a Space Marine player, because the points are quite tight. That you need, if you don't have those units to do that, and you say put it all into tanks, the tank's got to go on that objective and be shooting at the thing that's probably not next to that objective. Yeah. So
and cleanse,
and trying to cleanse, and suddenly like or doing recover assets, and it's not going to happen. And so it's sort of trying to line up, knowing which secondaries are a weakness for an army that's probably not wanting to do actions, so that I can kind of mitigate as best as possible. So like
I actually quite like that, and I think what's smart with that is you've started with the little things that often people might forget or then be trying to cram in. And what you've done there is like, well, if I know I need these fundamentals to mission play, then it's like I've got that on lot, and then what my damage or my holding or whatever else it is you need is coming out of what's left, and then you kind of know where you're working, right? So
it does sometimes make the damage be a compromise though. So like quite often I'll have a certain amount of points left and it'll be like, well, I can't fit 3 Vindicators in, so I'll take 3 Predator Destructors instead. And it's not the same thing, but it'll do.
Fun fact, I have hated every list I've ever played with 3 Predator Destructors in. I absolutely despise them. I don't know. I know they're in every list and they have been for a long time. I cannot make those tanks work. They drive me nuts. I hate them so much. Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. But I totally get it. And I think one other thing I was going to add is like, I think as a start point, I think one thing that I am very much guided by intent is the detachment, right, and the army rule. I think those are very useful guiding points for what you're doing with an army now. I think in terms of thinking, well, what's going to work. So if we think about the Brood Surge list, which I was kind of iterating on with Danny Porter when we first started playing that, you're looking at that at the time in terms of, well, how does Cult Ambush work? It's little coin toss rolls for units. So, okay, lots of little units then. That's what we want. And then also, how does bio work? Well, it boosts charges, it boosts pile-ins. Okay, well, what we want then is good combat units all over the place to take advantage of that. And actually, over time, the iteration was all to add the things. I started with those things, and then I worked back to find the tools rather than starting with the tools. Actually, probably would have saved myself time had I started with tools. But over time, it's like, oh, actually, what I need is a lone up over here. Okay, I take a Sanctus. What I need is some shooting because people keep shoving tanks at me because I forgot to bring any guns. So I'll put some Ridge Runners in, etc., etc. And you kind of, over time, work from the core concept. But I think that's where I love the detachment system for this, because when you're coming to an army fresh, it really does give you a very solid indication of where you should be looking in terms of the units, right? In terms of the combinations.
Because if it doesn't synchronize with that detachment, and it's not doing a thing like just being good guns, why is it in your army, essentially?
Yeah, exactly that. What do we think? I guess in terms of sort of potential pitfalls or sort of blind spots in list writing, what do you think the kind of issues people fall into are, and what are the things that people get wrong sometimes, or things you yourself have got wrong?
There's a number of things where you can go a little bit wrong. I think the number one thing is what we've kind of touched on here: copying someone else's list which doesn't suit you, or building a list which just doesn't suit you. Lots of people have copied Liam's list, and I've run 3 Land Raiders and 5 Dread Knights. So these things don't work out, because ultimately you have to understand the ins and outs of your list.
Yes.
In terms of actual little details in lists, I find it very interesting when a new codex comes out, and different people have different abilities to analyze units.
Yeah.
And the Eldar Codex is a brilliant example of this. I think, as we see people develop their list, there are a number of units which look absolutely broken. Like, everyone's talking about these 10 fire dragons in Fuego, and everyone's talking about Asuman, and they look nuts on paper.
Yeah.
But over time, as people try them and get past those things, they see, okay, maybe this isn't actually the most efficient thing. The only way to get around that pitfall, if your ability to analyze isn't, let's say, like top tier, most people can't look at it and be like, oh, that unit is, even though it looks good, it's actually not that good, is to just get them on the table and try and experiment with different things. And it's very important to try the units that you think are good, even if other people are telling you they're really bad, they're really good, whatever. Don't just follow what everyone's doing online. Make sure you experiment with the ideas that look like they will suit the way you want to play. That is the best approach to get into more innovative list design. That A, gets you a better result compared to what, say, you normally do. B, stops you completely falling apart and not enjoying your event. And C, there's some times where you innovate and make a list that no one else has seen, and there is nothing more satisfying than that when that becomes the meta.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's exactly right, and it is finding a style that works for you, and that's really, really important. And I definitely had this with GSC when the first one that people were excited about after the rules change was Outlander Claw, and I played Outlander Claw, and it was fine. I never got on with it. It didn't do the sorts of things I like to do with the list, so I didn't ever find the same ceiling with it. Right? You compare that to Bio, you're like, oh, this is going fast and hitting people. I love doing this. This is what I like to do, and so that works really, really well. And yeah, I think having. And this is actually something that we do in the coaching and mentoring. There's a justification process with list writing that I think is really useful. You go down a list and why is this in there? Why is this in there? Why is this in there? And ultimately, if the answer is because he's got a new model and he's really cool, then that's fine for a while. And as I say, with the Eldar book, I'll definitely indulge. When I don't actually get to play some Eldar games, I will indulge playing all the Phoenix Lords. Baharoth will be in, it'll just be non-negotiable. And then over time,
Morgan Ra.
Morgan Ra stonks. Oh, Morgan Ra, my favorite. He does a tiny explosion now, guys. He's amazing.
The Tempest launcher tech isn't bad with that, guys.
Interesting.
Just fire one Tempest launcher, you get the explosions off it.
Oh, that's quite smart. Spicy. Yeah. Oh, that's actually very fun. That's very
blow
fun.
up all the mortars. Just roll
fives. Yeah. That sounds legit. Right. Okay. I'm sold. There you go. And that's it. You just have to see a use case.
That's it.
Absolutely. How about you, Chris and John? Any sort of mistakes or recurring sort of issues with this rank?
I would really reinforce that point about giving units to try on the table, though.
Yes.
So I know, Vic, you've used that. You've used elsewhere the example of striking scorpions. You kind of like look at the striking scorpions. You don't necessarily go, oh yeah, but then actually, quite often they have a role. Yes. And sometimes you'll play the games and actually get to see that role out on the table. Whereas, like for me, I had 1 unit of 5 purifiers in my list for IGT because I had a very clear role for them in my head, and it didn't come up once. And in fact, it was and same with 5 Terminators, the second unit of 5 Terminators. It just didn't work the way I had envisaged it because I hadn't had enough reps. So it's really important to try that. But I would also say that when you're practicing your lists, I think quite often it's very easy to just go play a match. Oh, I've built this list. It's a great list. You go, you play 1 match. Didn't work. Right. Let's change half
in the bin.
Back to the drawing board. Clearly, that's not good enough because it didn't annihilate my opponent at the first. And I think we are often, if you feel like you've built a list and you feel like it's got potential, and it's just going to take some tweaking, you need to play it against different armies, different types. You've got to try and look past the bigger picture. Yeah, you might got smashed with that list, but that's because they made an 11-inch charge on turn 2, and actually it completely defined the game. You need to get lots of goes in, and when you are trying to work on the list, you don't want to be changing too much. With too many people. You know, like as soon as you change 2 or 3 units, especially if they're higher point units, you are changing that style of list. It's not in a tweaking phase anymore. So just be a bit, if you've got the time, obviously, then and you can get the reps in, be a bit more patient and accept that some games you are just playing just to try out units and see what the feel is like. And other times when you're trying to build towards a list, don't be afraid to keep going, but with like the small changes rather than just immediately panicking.
Absolutely. And I think to build on that, you can sometimes just encounter out in those games little things that you're like, oh, actually, that would be a really nice bolt-on or addition to this, right? I think the example when I played against Jack Tite when he was in the sort of Sisters heyday with my Drukhari, and it's the little canonesses, it's the little bait 2-up invuln. I was like, oh, that's brilliant because it forces my stuff out, forces me to come and play. And I was like, okay, I'll go and look at Drukhari like, oh, you know what? Urian Rakarth will do that all day long because he's 4-up, he gets back up again. I can use him as a little bait. And he became just a staple in my list as he goes in the middle, he baits stuff out, and then I can counterattack. And so you can see the way tools are used in other armies and then apply that to your own and think, do I have something in here like that's going to serve a similar job out there in the field? So that's really, really useful. Any kind of pitfalls or challenges for yourself, John?
Sometimes I find I will be so adamant I can make a unit work that sometimes you try it and it just won't. So there was times where, like, beginning of the edition, I was like, I'm going to make the Inner Circle Companions work. By the time I got them to work, it was because they'd fixed the data sheet. But I'm glad that I at least tried it, right? Like, sometimes you've got the unit built, you've got them painted. If you love the models, you're halfway there. Eventually, they'll get some better rules, but at the same time, having them ready to rock, I think, was something good for list building. So I've got Belial half painted at the moment. If they change him up, he's not done, so I won't be able to jump out with him. So sometimes if you like a unit well enough, get it painted anyway, because eventually you'll get to use it, and you don't then have that production log kind of lag of getting it ready unless you're doing TTS. I think that's an important thing I've learned to do. It's like, if you like a unit, eventually it'll be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
All those Reaver mains are ready. I'm still building mine.
They've been waiting so long, the Reaver mains. They've got their time. I think, it's a funny thing. I think I mean, you'll know, John, because I came up in this scene local to you. I used to really enjoy making things that weren't very good work, and I do think there's a good mental challenge in that. I quite enjoy the challenge of that. But actually, one thing I would certainly say for people who are starting out competing and trying to get their head around competing is things that are just good. Do not stand between. Don't let your pride stand between you and the stuff that just works in your army. Right? I was very guilty of this. I'm like, I don't want to play Cult of Strife witches, because everyone's playing Cult of Strife witches, and you're like, well, yeah, it's because they're amazing and they turn off Overwatch. Like, it's very good. It's a very good thing to have. So I think Rob Kimpton in the chat says this all feels like a personal attack at my Shrike Vanguard list.
That's a great list.
It's actually not too bad. Yeah, it's not too bad. If you want to see it play against the Night Lords detachment on our TTS, you can see the video from last week. It's a very fun, very silly game. Rob and I have a very good time. I do want to shout out, we've got a question from Donald Cowie, I assume for Vic, which says, what should I build the Striking Scorpion Exarch with?
Oh, fantastic. Well, so on the Fireside Discord, plug, we have a lot of spreadsheets of all the different profiles that all of the Exarch weapons can go into. But I'll give you guys this one for free. So Donald, the Striking Scorpion Exarch, it's very, very close between the Chain Sabers and the Biting Blade. If you, with the Biting Blade, if you flip a dice to a 6 on it, it is slightly better than the Chain Sabers overall. So the Biting Blade is probably overall the single best choice to go for. But the Chain Sabers are so cool. Are you willing to compensate 0.1 of damage for incredible dual wielding coolness?
I love the duality. You've got Dave's answer covered. You've got Vic's answer covered. He's managed to represent both. Hello to Dave in the chat, by the way. Good to have you here, mate. And I also want to shout out John C, who celebrates a month of membership. You guys have been crushing it with the great guests. Keep it up. Yeah, we're loving the guest episodes. It's really, really fun. And thank you to all of you for supporting us. It's been such a cool year for that. Okay, fantastic. Right, so I think we're moving it forwards then, and let's start thinking a little bit about some of the minutiae, I guess, and especially for 10th edition itself. I guess if we think about tools and solutions and things that you've found yourself needing over as 10th edition has evolved, what kinds of things and sort of specifics in terms of tools and mechanics within your lists have you found yourself coming back to again and again?
So I've found the 10th edition, you really need to know where on the spectrum of I'm going to kill my opponent and I'm going to score my points.
Yeah.
And I've done everything from playing Thousand Suns, where I haven't cared about my points, I just need to table my opponent, to playing Hallowed Martyrs Sisters, where I don't care about killing my opponent, I just want to frustrate them and score my points. And there are great tools for both of them. You know, on the killing side of things, which is something that I think Eldar sit into really well, is you need the speed and the ability for your units to access an area of the board and completely remove it, because then your opponent can't properly counterattack it. That theory has been through 40K for as long as I remember, and if you can do that effectively, you get something called momentum in games. And momentum allows you to win your games by your opponent eventually dying too quickly and not able to keep up with your point scoring at the end of the game. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the strategy we talked about earlier with the macro strategy, where you have all of your units set up in place that you are not missing a single secondary. You're scoring 10 primary every turn. You're going to deny your opponent's primary twice, and you'll win the game every time. That is a perfectly valid strategy as well. But Pariah Nexus missions have really felt like they've fallen more towards the latter than the former at the moment. I think most people are playing to quite high scoring kind of games, and all playing like primary denial. Just it's a lot less about killing and more about having a core strategy.
Completely.
Which is kind of sad. I like just, send it,
How about you, 10th? How about you, 10th? How about you, Chris? Is there any sort of 10th edition tools you've come back to again and again?
That's a compliment. It's his favourite edition of the game.
It actually is my favourite edition. Yeah, indeed. Go on then, Chris.
I think
it's got no time for that at all. None whatsoever.
You know what? Whenever I don't have them, I really wish I had lone ops.
Yes.
My Grey Knights don't really have lone ops apart from obviously the Calidus, and there have been quite a few times where I'm like, I could just sit in this space and not get shot, and that'd be really nice. I know, especially when I watch battle reports now, people using lone ops in like really efficient ways. I think like that can be. I think that's obviously something that's very quite unique to the edition, but obviously they're by no means essential at all. But I just think for some armies they're a really, really useful tool. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with this. It's just become a bit of a primary battle, especially when you play a lot of teams, because obviously the way you create the biggest differential is through the primary, and so if you're building tools to lock down yours and deny theirs, and that's it. So, OC is obviously a new thing to 10th. So being able to manipulate OC, like maybe take down OC or build your OC up, getting high value OC into very small packages is really, really useful. And those sorts of things. I think obviously that's not useful for all armies, but you take an army, someone like Harlequins was not a standalone army. All of a sudden, you've now got in a very small and maneuverable package, you've got OC10 or potentially higher to just go and sit on an objective and just be really, really annoying. And like those sorts of things have certainly had quite a lot of success in kind of 10th.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, John?
What was the question? I literally just got so interested in what we were saying.
What
I just forgot what the question was.
I guess, what are some of the sort of recurring tools or minutiae of 10th lists that you found yourself coming back to again and again as the edition's gone on? So, we're quite a way in now, right? So we're quite established in what we like and how we like to play.
So I think it's having at least one lone op just to do, especially infiltrating lone ops. To me, having someone that can be in the big L kind of helping against sort of turn 1 area denial, but safely, not being just a charge target, and then fast moving infantry, like having the jump pack guys that can go get to my expansion, tuck in neatly, because having to just advance things always feels a bit of a risk because the distance between the ruins is often a bit too sort of much at times. I think countering to that, there's stuff like assassins. At the beginning of the edition, I was putting at least one in a list. They're not in my lists anymore. So I just find that although I love lone ops, they're not the lone ops I'm taking. I think it's the price.
Yeah. We've got a great shout out as well from John C in the chat who says playing armies that can sticky objectives is a luxury mechanic. Sticky objectives is very, very good, and it is one of those things that once you have used it, you're always thinking about where you can get that from in the future, right? It's a very useful tool.
Tom, there's one thing we haven't mentioned, which is the impact of rapid ingress.
Very good. That's great.
Playing out of strat reserves and deep strike and incorporating at least some element of that into your list, I think is extremely powerful in 10th. 10th is almost like you have these two economies, which are your armies, and they slowly get whittled down. But if you force your opponent to use some of that wastefully to screen out stuff that hasn't even come onto the board yet, you can start to get a little bit ahead on your resources. So, deep strike, if only for the threat of it, is very powerful because no one wants you deep striking right in the middle of the back of their lines. 100%. And some people, it's a natural instinct. If they have something in deep strike, even if they would never put it in a space, you will screen out that space just in case.
Just in case.
Absolutely.
I think having some kind of deep strike threat, and if you can have a really good rapid ingress threat in your faction, is so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. There's always a balance to strike, right? And I think you can go too far in that direction. You can you can have far too much of a reserves punch, leave yourself vulnerable to getting flooded at the start or whatever. But having something, because as you say, if there is something, then they have to play like it's there for 2 turns. That's very, very valuable. And I was going to lead me to the 2 things that came to mind for me was one, and people who know me will know this, I am not happy if my list does not have little idiots in. I believe I popularized the term little idiots. You need to have disposable, unimportant people in your list who will go out, they will score cards, they will block things, they will die. That are not, if you lose them, the game is not over, right? And I really struggle with lists that don't have that kind of disposability element in them. I think it's very useful to have stuff that can be thrown away earlier in the early exchanges of games and isn't going to leave you in a position unable to push back or push forwards later on. And then the other one was, I think you should always be looking for the things that your particular army or detachment has that break the rules of engagement. I think lists that have a couple of things that don't play by the conventional rules are really, really useful. And again, I refer back to the Brood Surge list, but the Abominant in that was just so useful. Having several Abominants where it's like they are not dying in a phase, they're getting back up. That just changes the momentum of the engagement in that list massively. But obviously different armies have it in different ways. I think to your Exalted Sorcerers on discs, how many rules did they break in a game? Just kind of disc flying out the window of the rhino. Like who knows what's going on there? I think you got these guys going 26 inches, killing 2 units, blocking off an entryway, like some absolutely ridiculous stuff. And if you've got those little tools, those sucker punches, those things that I think most of the best armies in 10th have had something in the pocket like that. Some of those things have gradually been nerfed away and aren't as dominant now. You can just have tons of stuff. That is a valid approach as well. But breaking the rules is always very nice if you can do it, I think. I've got a Tyranids player listing some things that they don't have, so they'd like in their list.
But touching on that, that's often a thing that I'll often put into lists, knowing like jump back intercessors that I'm planning to throw a grenade at something they shouldn't be able to kill, just to get those extra wounds through, because that then like you say, breaks the rules. Because mortal wounds is something I find is very crucial to have.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I think one thing, again, we've alluded to it, but I think I'm very interested, especially now, to know the extent to which this is still happening. Because I think one thing we've always done in competitive list writing is tried to build tech and counters for what else is out there. And I guess the interesting question at this stage of 10th is, to what extent do you let what else is out there shape and determine how your lists look? Or is it better just playing to the strengths of whatever it is you're playing for the most part? What would you say the answer there is?
So to give practical advice on this depends on your goals here.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a very different topic if you're trying to win like a massive tournament, or if you're trying really hard to go 3-2, 2-3, 4-1 at a tournament. And if you try to win a tournament, you often have to skew quite hard at the moment to what's at the very top of the meta if those are not the armies you're playing. For example, now I can't go into a tournament with my Aeldari army without having some kind of answer if I play against Guard with 9 mortars. Because if I go in and I just get that as a pairing, it does not matter if my person is practically new at the game and I've been playing for 6 years. I will still almost definitely lose at that game. And that's a situation that is I can't have if I'm trying to win a tournament. So my list is going to compromise on a number of other matchups in order to compensate for that. I may only want 1 wave sub in my list, but I have 4 now, for example. That's like, just what are your mortars going to do now? But practically, not everyone is going with that goal. And in fact, the vast majority of people are not going with that goal of winning a super major every time they go to a tournament. They are going to go with the goal of just doing really well as best as they can with the faction that they're going with. And I think the key is not to compromise your list too far to try and beat these kind of unbeatable matchups. If you hit those matchups, you have a good time, play a game as best as you can. But sometimes, you just can't deal with 9 mortars. It's just going to kill you. But at least you can have a good game into a wider range of armies that you're going to face.
Completely. How about you, Chris? To what extent do you tech 4 things in the game now?
I'm always a bit taking. No, I think it is genuinely interesting one. Obviously, because we've experienced, I've been to like 20, 30 person GTs. I've looked at who's going. I've looked at potentially stronger players, and I've gone, they're probably going to take this. Is there anything I want to adjust for? And I definitely massively got in my own head for this with LGT. LGT is obviously impossible to predict, right? Like, even when I got to the 5th round undefeated, there was like so many players I could have played. Like, it's really, really hard to tailor for that. And, I took my Grey Knights and I was like, what if I play Thousand Suns? I need librarians. I need librarians in my list so that if I play
Chris, you hate librarians.
I absolutely hate librarians, Tom, but I was like, I need them in my list because I never want to walk up to the table and be like, well, I've just lost this game. If I don't have the librarians, or the Grey Knight Mirror as well. I don't have the librarians and they do, or I play into Thousand Suns, I don't have them. I just lose the game and that feels crap. So I put those into my list, and it definitely neutered the way my list had been designed previously. And I therefore, with a lack of experience of just playing and reps and stuff, I didn't perform as well as I wanted to because I weakened my list more so I had to have even more player skill to try and win out. And it just didn't work out. So I think it's, for me, and us mere mortals, I probably lean more into playing and building a list which how it functions. And certainly, skews obviously do generally, you hear people say, well, if you want an easy ride, just build a heavily skewed list, and it will sometimes you'll just get to walk up to the table and you've just won the game. And that's like 9 mortars size and all the indirect, right? Some guard lists will just lean heavily into that, and we'll just win some games. So I think it's a really interesting one, and Vic's nailed it there when he says it depends entirely on what your hopes and goals are, because I'm sure at the highest level, you go into a super major, you're one of the top players, you know that you're probably going to have to beat Vic or David Gaylord, or when he was coming Manny or whatever. You had to have your eye on the pulse of who what these players were kind of taking, and you had to they created their own mini meta of the top 8 or top 10. Whereas the rest of us are like, well, I just hope I play my army well and maybe I can beat the things, and if it's a bad matchup, it's a bad matchup.
I think the muscle memory of adapting for particular lists comes a lot further down the process, I think, and I think it's not a good place to start, right? And I think it's very important to start with, do I feel like I'm playing this version of this army the way it wants to be played and playing that well, and do I have all the tools to do that? And then sneaking the adjustments in and taking things like.
I also think it's just really genuinely hard. Like, we talk about it, and people are like, "Oh, well, it's teams, so build a list to be able to beat this, or be able to beat this particular army." And I'm like, if someone told me, "Oh, build Grey Knights to go and beat X army," I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I know what my army does, and I can probably work out roughly what their weaknesses, but it's actually a really hard thing to do.
For sure.
It's not as easy as, there are a load of T3 bodies out in the open, so I'll take a load of indirect. Like, it's very rarely is it like that simple a solution. Actually, for the Grey Knight, the only thing I could come up with is mortal wound defense is good against all the mortal and death wounds from like things like Thousand Suns. But a lot of the time, it's actually a very specific thing you need to be working out and analyzing, and that's way harder than just having that discussion. I think too many people are just like, I'll just, especially at teams, I hear this all the time. We need you to build a list so you can beat these matchups. I'm like, well, actually, that's really, really hard, guys. Can we talk about this a bit more, please? Just give me some sort of hints. So the players that are able to come up with that fair play. So so if you do find it hard, guys, don't worry. It is actually a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. How about you, Scrib? To what extent do you kind of build for other armies?
So I historically tried a bit too much of this, and I got in my own head. I think a good example is there was the horrible, was it 8th Space Marine Codex, where they were literally half the field.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, I'm building my alt list. I'm going to have all the stuff that will kill Space Marines. Went to a 60-man GT, didn't play Space Marines once.
Yeah. There you go.
And it's just like,
there you go. And what are the odds of that? Like, when does that happen? Like,
and then this edition, I just find, like, whenever I try to build a list that's specifically trying to prey on something, I'm either not going to face it, or it doesn't do the job enough because I've not practiced it enough. So sometimes I just find that the better success I've had, especially at events, as being someone that's kind of in the middle of the pack, pushing my way up a little bit further. If I've got the list I've got better reps with, even if it's not the best version of the army, because I know what I can do with it. Like when I played 2-3 events as Stormlance, because by the third time I played it, I got sort of 15 reps with it. I knew what I could do with those little units, and it was more useful than me going, right, I'm now bringing Gladius Ultramarines with no reps.
Yeah.
It was just, it felt like I was actually more rewarding and probably getting a better result as a result of the player competency. And I think
for sure.
10th probably encourages that a lot more.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's about what you're excited about and what you're enjoying and your relationship to that. I mean, we had this with Northern Warlords teams, right? Where we were looking at your list and the whole new oaths for Marines had just happened. But it's like you just got your head around using all the Blood Angels characters and you were really excited about using the Blood Angels characters. So I was like, well, that's more fun for you and you're going to get more joy out of that than just new oaths plus one.
So much fun.
And you had it all the time. Yeah, with Sanguinor, Mephiston doing all sorts of nonsense. You're like, better to use all that built up knowledge and excitement to use it, right? And you did try point Gilliman with 3 tanks. Yes, you did. That was a personal highlight. He tried to cut his way out. A tank exploded and killed him. It was a good day. It was a good day for everyone involved. But I've definitely had this, and I think for those thinking about taking things, as Vic says, it can often be a case of if you've reached a level where you know who you will have to beat to win events, and you're confident you'll be playing those people. Wonderful. Okay, by all means, start preparing for those people, and I'm sure some players do that. But actually, it's a stick or twist thing, and either call can be wrong. And so the example, so Nottingham, again, the meta had shifted. I've been playing Bio, I've been playing GSC for a few months, and it had been very, very good relative to the meta. The meta had shifted, and looking at it, I'm like, I don't think it's quite as good relative to the field now as it was. And the temptations there will try something else, do something else, adjust the list. But actually, I was like, no, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to stay with what I've been playing and playing well. And then actually, in the end, the run was things that Bio could handle and got through that very happily, right? And if I twisted to something, tried to get too clever with it, which I definitely did the Nottingham before, with Thousand Suns, it can go really wrong. So there's important lessons there, I think. I do think in particular metas, one thing that is worth shouting out is that every now and again a meta is a kind of stat check meta in terms of there is just a sort of slab of something out there that a lot of people take, whether that's Wraiths or Deathwing Knights or those kinds of things. And in those sorts of metas where there is a really dominant stat check, thinking about, well, how do I shift that at a pace that will work, and how do I block and outscore that at a pace that will work? I think that is a useful thing to carry into your list design, but I think mercifully those metas are rarer now, as Vic alludes to, right? We don't have quite the same like raw stat check meta these days. Okay, fantastic. I mean, I think that's covered the main fundamentals I was interested in covering. I guess, is there any sort of really useful parting thoughts or encouragement, words of advice that you can give to our listeners as they go off on their list writing adventure, everybody, before we get into the questions?
I've got one here.
Yeah.
And I think something which is underexplored, but you always see at WTC, is that the impact that taking something that no one knows what it does.
Yes.
There are some people who do this brilliantly. You'll get people like Innes. They'll just rock up with this GSC list that no one's been using for 6 months. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this is the best thing in the world. Let's all use it. But Innes was the first one, So maybe he wasn't the first one. But the point is that taking something which no one has used or seen before is a very powerful tool for success at any level of the game. Even from small RTTs up to massive World Team Championship level. So don't be afraid to come up with your own idea as well.
Completely. Yeah. And it's not about sort of whether a new concept is bad. It's about any new concept can be good if you have put the thought and the work into how it's going to function. That's the thing. It's not like if you have an idea and you take that through to delivery in terms of, okay, well, here's all the tools and here's how it works. John C. in the chat says, so take a defiler, right? Well, again, I ran multiple defilers on stream when we were testing the new Death Guard detachment, and they were great.
They didn't win the game. The rest of them won the game.
The Death Shroud may have done more work than the defilers, but the defilers did screen huge amounts of space. Oh dear, very, very funny. And so I think that's definitely a really, really good piece of advice. Any parting shots from you, Chris?
Just have fun with it. I think really it's at the end of the day, there are so many. We're obviously talking about it from you want to go to the tournament, you want to go to a tournament, and you want to do well point of view. But I think it's work out what your list building style is. Like as Vic said, he's got his own. He's quite creative, got an artistic flair to it. David Gaylard is robot, boom. Zeros and ones, beep boop, comes up with a really high quality formula, and it's really effective. Work out what works for your style and just try some stuff out. I think these days, I certainly fall into the trap of it, I think we are very easily swayed by what other people say on the internet. Yes. I will have come up with an idea in my head, or I would have written something off. I'll go on Discord and I'm suddenly like, no, actually, that's a very good point. So maybe I should include this, and I'll be like building all these lists and, right, well, they've said this and it didn't work for them, so I'll take it out. And actually, you know what? The only way you can ever know is by playing it. Like a case in point for me personally at the moment is lots of Grey Knight players are obviously taking Purgation Marines and they're all running side cannons on those Marines. I have been running silencers and I absolutely love the silencers and they have worked really, really well for me in a whole bunch of matchups. It depends how you use them. But and you can do the maths and you can have that extra 0.1 better weapon, but actually it might just be you're planning on using your unit in a slightly different way, and it just leans into the fact that you've got to list build for yourself and not just what the internet says.
Completely. Yeah, I think learning to trust your own instincts is just such a big part of getting places with list writing, but also indeed 40K in general, right? And I think that's it's always useful to get outside ideas, and I appreciate the degree of irony here because we're here giving you outside ideas. But I think it's still useful to also be ready to say, actually, that's not for me. That's not working. This does work for me. I like this, and I'm going to build around this instead. But just as long as you're doing that in a very conscious way, and you understand what your process is, that's where the learning comes from. And as I say, there's a lot of joy in making the things you want to work, and finding your way with that as well. And as Vic says, the element of surprise can be a very big deal as well. I paired into the Kroot hunting pack list round 1 at LGT. Everyone's laughing. The lad had literally been dared to build and paint it the week before or something to take to LGT, and we're both having a giggle at the start. And in the back of my head, I'm like, if he goes first, I just lose here, and there's nothing I can do. And then luckily I did go first. But I was just like, that for everyone involved is like a bit of a gimmick, a bit of a joke. It's a powerful thing. It does a powerful thing that if you're not ready for it, very, very dangerous, right, in a particular moment in time. So really, really cool. Any sort of parting bits of advice from you, Scrib?
I think it's like, if you are going to compromise and bring the stuff that you love, know how much you can dilute your list before it becomes really a problem. Because it can often be like, you'll bring a cute unit that costs 200 points, and you're like, cool. That doesn't ruin the list. But if you suddenly get to the point where you've got a quarter of your army is just stuff that's not very good, and you're still there going, well, my goal is a 3-2. It's not happening. Just rein it in sometimes. And just on the flip side, don't always listen to people on the internet that say this is mechanically the way you have to run your list. Because yes, just because everyone's saying you should run a Stormlance or you should be playing Imperial Fist detachments with Guilliman for the sake of it, if you're not enjoying that or you don't own that army, play what you're already playing and just make the best with it. And I think that is, you'll still get the results you want because you've got the reps.
That is the exciting thing about lists as well, is that people can play them completely differently, right? Like completely differently in terms of, I remember seeing Alexandra Sacco's face at WTC when he played against Nas, and he had not seen Guard played that way in his practice, right? And Nas starts doing his thing, and Sacco's just going, "This is going to go really badly" to his coach. Because like, people just use the tools in completely different ways, and I think that's a really cool thing. So find what your style is and what you're enjoying, and build in and around that. Okay, guys, thanks so much for bearing with us thus far. Thank you to Vic for all those wonderful insights as well. We're going to hit some questions up, and then we will call it a day. So if you have questions for Vic, do drop them in, because who knows when he'll be here again. We only nag him to come on very regularly, so I can't promise anything. So get those questions in the chat. If you want to leave us a super chat, that's wonderful. Hit the old like and subscribe as well. If you want to sign up and become a YouTube member, that's also absolutely brilliant. And we'll start fishing some questions out of the Discord too. We have one from Sam Dunn who says, do any of you have any hard and fast rules for when you change things in terms of reps? That's interesting. So sample size is often so small, making decisions of it comes down to feeling. That's quite interesting. So yeah, how many times do you need to test a thing to know whether you need to cut it or change it? That's very interesting.
It's vibes, to be fair. It is a lot
of
vibes.
It is vibes.
You just can't play against everything at all levels and really, know every single matchup. You're definitely not going to know everyone's rules. So, I found a lot of the time the second time you play against something, you're a lot better against it than the first time you play against it. There are two things I would say to this. One is try and pick and choose a little bit, like think in your head, okay, these are one or two armies that I want to play against with this army. You also want to get a few reps to try and optimize your list, find what feels good. Like Scrivo was saying, you've got your core of your list. You're just spending 100 hours optimizing a little bit at the end. All 40K players go through that. The second one is, it does really help for you just to keep a little pulse on the game. Yes. Watch like podcasts like this, every now and then just jump into Discords and see what the new rules are. Read an article about the new rules that are just coming out. It only takes, 10, 15 minutes just to see like all these stratagems in the new army that's just come out. Rather than letting it being a complete mystery to you, at least you can have some background understanding of how the game's developing. That does help quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it depends. The context really, really matters, right? Like, and that's where I think one thing we didn't talk about too much, but I think matchups and having an awareness of your matchups is very useful in this. So to give you an example from my early 10th days, the Hecaton land fort, right? I played some games against Eldar where the Hecaton land fort got absolutely melted. But as a Votann player, you're like, am I going to beat Eldar if I take the land fort out? No. So I'm not going to worry about it very much. That's just going to happen to the land fort in that matchup. That's just the way of it. It's going to save me in other situations and other games, right? And so I think having a fix on where there are changes that will genuinely, especially in singles, is that change genuinely getting you over the line against that army, or does that army just have your number and actually you need to focus on the other ones? I think having a spread of that and an awareness of that is very useful. But certainly trying a unit several times, and again, to refer back to Yuri and Rakarth from earlier on, like we have a Drukhari chat with various Archons in, and some of them still don't get Yuri and Rakarth. It's like you just have to put him on the table and see it, and to know that he's brilliant. But I think it is one of those things where for different people it takes different amounts of time, right? We have another question from John C, who asks, do you have a cooling off period after a game before making any changes to avoid knee-jerk decisions? I love that. What do you think?
I sleep on it. I don't try to change my list when I get back from the club, and I'm like, well, that went wrong.
And you're wired. You're wired after your game.
That Vector ruined me, so now I've got to put one into my list. And in reality, it's a niche thing that's about your management, your CP, but you're still sitting there going, that's going to screw other people over. Just sleep on it, come back to it. I tend to find with a fresh set of eyes, I'm a little bit more like, that was because of that unit in that matchup. It's not how it would be most of the time.
That's really useful. How about you guys?
I think it's worth looking at it less as this unit was bad and more as my army has a problem with this.
Yes.
If you create a little bit of a list of problems, like, I'm really not good at I'm short of one unit to screen the space out. I'm short of one unit to attack my opponent's primary. I'm finding, by turn 3, I suddenly really don't have anything which I can leave on my backfield objective. It has to run forward. If you make a list of problems and optimize towards a list of problems, it's a lot healthier than saying, this unit did bad in this game because it died straight away, so let's take it out of the list. Because that's very game dependent rather than problem orientated.
I think that's very, very useful.
Because a lot of people say like their infiltrators died early, so that's the infiltrator's fault. It's probably that they've put them a bit too close or a bit more open, perhaps.
Yeah, and you do want to be very careful about, sometimes it's an application thing as well, right? And it can be a unit. I've had a unit I've been sort of assessing in the last few days, and ultimately whether that unit was good wasn't really the question. I just used it badly in a couple of games, right? So if you look at it, you're like, that thing didn't get to do its thing. I played it badly. So actually the lesson on me is, where do I need to put that and use it in order to make it work? Rather than, do I just take this out and change this to something else?
I would be very careful not to knee-jerk the core of your list.
Oh, yeah.
But I would say you can quite aggressively knee-jerk your little add-ons at the end, because it's also important to keep trying different combinations before you settle on something. You're not going to have 100 practice games. You're probably, at most going to have like 10, before a big tournament or something, if you really find some time to do that. And in those 10 games, you've got to try a few little kind of eccentric pieces to get it there. So hold your core and just keep playing around with the stuff on the edges, is my advice.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Can we shout out probably the greatest question we've ever had, which from J-Mail, celebrating 6 months of membership. What a hero. He says, from Virgin to Bonnie Blue, how fucked to sisters?
Go on then, Vic. What's the prognosis for sisters, Vic?
It's you know what? I think half of the update was missing. There was definitely like you know what, guys? Let's tone down all this Miracle Dice stuff. And I must have been imagining it, but I swear it was like all the points are down on the melee, and I just can't find that bit of the balance update anymore.
Just keep scrolling.
Heartbreaking, really heartbreaking.
Yeah, they'd sort of landed at balance before that last one. It felt like they were nearly there. Like they were pretty much like it was in a very reasonable place before the last set of nerfs, I think, and that was a tough time for sisters right now.
I'll tell you this: sisters were screwed from the start.
Yeah.
As soon as the codex dropped, they were destined for ruin with that codex.
Yeah.
The index was beautiful; it captured the feel of sisters perfectly, and then we ended up with codex tank. And Codex tank is never a position you want to be, especially when you're also Eldar in disguise and have fate dice and miracle dice. Because not only are you Codex tank and everyone hates playing against you, but everyone hates the fact you have a dice fixing mechanic.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what your win rate is. If you're awful to play against everyone has this perception that this is an awesome army to play against, then it's going to be something that gets nerfed quite aggressively.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw here. We didn't see any kind of compensatory buff for sisters. We just saw an aggressive put them in the ground, which makes sense because a lot of people are not going to be playing sisters. They're just going to be playing against sisters.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree. I think they were very hard done by in the end, but it was certain mechanics do just rub people up the wrong way. And Miracle Dice and Fate Dice certainly is one. The Aspect Dice are just starting to grate me a little bit. They're pretty spicy when they get going.
Absolutely. Why does everyone seem to have 3 aspect tokens on every one of their units? You know,
bonkers, absolutely bonkers. They're so good.
It's fine.
So good. All right, picking some questions out of the Discord now, but do keep them coming in the chat. We had a question from. We've got a very wide open question from Hannibal who asked, what are some good tips for playing Aeldari? I mean, I'll let you run at that, Vic.
Where's that?
This is from our podcast questions in the Discord.
Oh, beautiful.
Hannibal, I mean, feel free to give us the wisdom on Aeldari if you want.
I mean, there's a lot of content out there.
Yeah.
I would recommend checking out a video I did about 10 things I love about the Eldar Codex. And then I did one straight afterwards, which was just on ranking the aspect warriors. Beyond just the title of the video, I did kind of go through my thoughts on how they all fit within a kind of a strategy on how to play the army really well. But it's all early thoughts. A lot of people are coming up with lots of different ideas. I would honestly say the Eldar Codex is so incredibly balanced that there are going to be so many successful archetypes, and it's not obvious which set of units is better than which other set of units. So the best thing I can say is kind of play around with it, look at the rules, spend your hours and hours endlessly tweaking your list, and just put something on the table, because you will realize straight away what does and doesn't work for you with Eldar. And you will find something that works really well. So Eldar can play everything from a primary holding, secondary playing game, all the way up to I'm going to absolutely kill my opponent and end the game with scraps, but you're dead as well. So you'll find something that suits you. Just get it on the board.
100%. Now, what I would say from playing against it so far is it feels like a lot of the conventional pillars of playing Eldar well are back, and it rewards that. I think a lot of things in terms of the management of resources and space and speed is very much what a lot of the detachments really want you to do, and then that little bit of trickery and sneakiness to kind of get your leg ups and take advantage of mistakes in places as well. So that's a very exciting place to be. I think a lot of the fundamentals of playing the fragile, sneaky thing very much back.
So I have a question, because obviously when the book dropped, it's overwhelming the amount of things that Eldar can do, and we always, as Eldar players, we like to defend ourselves that we're not playing the most broken faction. So we always go back to, but we can't hold primary very well.
Until you're completely dead.
And then that's how all Eldar players defend themselves. We can't hold primary very well. So Tom, obviously played against it a lot. Vic, you used it a lot. How are you finding the primary aspects? I've played a lot of this. I played 0 games with or against it so far. So how are you finding Aeldari on primary?
Let's have Vic for the playing experience, and I'll talk about playing against it as well.
Got it. Okay, so just for primary purely, I would say that for a lot of the Eldar kind of stuff, let's say you take Aspect Host, the most aggressive of the detachments. Your primary is holding their home objective as your primary. Okay. So that's one way of looking at it. And then you get other armies like Ynnari, who have built-in abilities to sticky with one of their stratagems. They have a move at the end of the opponent's shooting phase, which allows you to control primary as well.
It's wild.
So your primary control is going to be phenomenal in Ynnari, and in Aspect Host is going to be all based on killing your opponent. So there are different playstyles and ways of managing it. But Eldar are quite weak at primary control, which is a weakness in this mission format compared to a lot of other mission formats that we've had in the past. So as much as Eldar players use it as an excuse, it is actually a tangible reason why I think Eldar may struggle to actually win games. As a player base, the Eldar player base is incredibly skillful. There's a lot of people who will take the strongest thing they can and not hold back at all and want to do well. So the Eldar player base will always push it to its limit, but I think people will struggle to get through their games to victory at the moment with the new codex, compared to how broken it may look on paper.
Yeah, for sure. And I think so. Playing against it, it's an army that a lot of the detachments will cede space to begin with. They will give you space to play to begin with because they need you to be playing so they can start whittling down your resources because they need to clear you out and come into the game, right? I think most of the detachments, if they pushed too recklessly at you, will really struggle to protect the resources they are going to need because they have a lot of these lists have units they really want to use for 5 whole turns. And so if they don't do that, it can get very, very precarious. They also have little idiots everywhere. And Eldar lists, actually, at the moment, there is some very, very good little idiots available. Striking Scorpions, Warp Spiders, Rangers, these things all do an amazing job right now. So I think there's almost a sort of fake Eldar game you're playing in front. There's the real Eldar game, which is a bunch of stuff that has to live and do its job and will eventually win the game for you. And it's balancing those resources. And so I think as an Eldar player, you've got to know what you can afford to lose and what you can't, and play that game very, very carefully. And obviously, as Vic's alluding to, there's quite a lot of armies in the game that make them really struggle not to give up and lose the things they can't afford to lose at the moment. But there's some incredible damage and reach in there when it gets going as well. And it's just figuring it out. We've got a shout out. Our very own Ed is in the chat and says that the book is fantastically fun. It most certainly is. Ed certainly has his own wonderful ideas on how to play Eldar, doesn't he? So some very, very cool stuff in there. Okay, so we had a question about tournament games. Is there enough time currently allowed for tournament games, or are there too many points on the board? That's from Pancake.
I have an answer for this.
Go on then, Screw. Go on, Screw.
I think if you're at the top of your game, you play it 3 times a week, it's fine time-wise. But the minute you do it as a pickup game or something you play semi-infrequently, so you go to one tournament every 2 months, 3 hours is actually a stretch because it's a lot of dice rolling, a lot of mechanics. The game changes so frequently that you're going to be asking a lot of questions as well. So I would argue it probably is actually not enough time for your average player.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And
I think
that's who they should be targeting the game at, really.
Yeah, because I think my answer is that I haven't existed in the realm where I represented your average player for a very long time. The muscle memory has just been far too ingrained that I'm done with a lot of time to spare. But as you say, you have to think if someone is putting this down and they're not playing a ton and they're actually trying to get through it all. I do personally feel like 10th is probably better in terms of speed of play. I think it's a bit snappier than 9th. Yeah. That might be purely feeling rather than
still does struggle.
Less rerolls, of course. Yeah. Certainly in that Eldar book for sure. So yeah, it's interesting.
And it's interesting. I think the reality is if most of us now are regularly going to UKTC events, and we've all commented on how the standard has increased so much at UKTC events, and it's just full of people who are constantly playing competitively. And as you say, you have that muscle memory. You've trained yourself. I don't, even if I play the clock or if I don't play the clock, my games always end at roughly the same amount of time because I allow myself roughly the same amount of thinking time all the time because I've just done it so many times. And I think it's been noticeable for me to when I've gone to like maybe a smaller event like a Saffron event or that's something, and you do only get to like turn 3 or maybe turn 4, and it's like okay, because people who haven't played as much just don't have that ingrained muscle memory. I think there's also an entirely separate conversation to be had on if we want 40K to blow up to be a big esport, so to speak. Is a 3.5 hour stream the way forward? Because it's really hard to commentate on well. And if this game is to actually get to a place where it could be watched by tens of thousands of people, does it need to be a lot shorter and snappier, or does there need to be a big change in how it works? If that was something we wanted, or does it have the capability of getting there with the 3 hour games and the traditional 2,000 points? I think
that is interesting.
It would take a bunch of the big players to go to a famous, well-held event by UKTC. Let's say UKTC went, right, we're going to have a 1,000-point event, and we're going to invite all the top 50 players in the UK to this event. We're going to have a massive live stream. We're going to make it a really big deal. And it would take all the top players to go to that event, have fun, and go, actually, this is. I think this could be a good way. And I think it needs that driving force from a large amount of the community.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, it's someone has to try it, right?
7th edition, it was all community led, and when it felt too many points, 1750 became a thing. You often had events
that's
that were 1500,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure the game's designed to scale as well that way. I don't think it's fair for everyone.
I remember playing some 1,000-point games against your orcs and thinking it wasn't scaling very well. Trucks were a real pain in my heart in that game.
And that's it. It's the game. They've got to, in theory, the game has got to be built to be balanced at a certain point, right? As we know that if you play 1,000 points, or let's say you play 3,000 points, things scale. For us who played a long time, it feels like 2,000 points feels like that is roughly the right amount. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, tough balance to strike for sure. Mr. Fellblade asks, when writing a list, do you think through how it stacks up against all 20-something other armies, or do you just think generally about how it goes into army archetypes?
Kind of answered his own question almost there.
Yeah.
Because, looking at it in archetypes is a very powerful way of doing it.
Yeah.
Am I going to lose to everyone who has melee pressure armies, covers about 6-7 different factions immediately? Am I going to lose to armies that are kind of monophase shooting, or these massive horde armies, or a full vehicle skew like knights? Splitting it into that allows you to cover the majority of armies very quickly, but there is some value at looking specific other factions, particularly the stronger or more popular kind of flavor of the month kind of factions, and delving into them a little bit deeper, or finding times to get a practice game in them.
Completely.
But yeah, archetypes are very important for practice.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're first competing, you learn the hard way with archetypes, right? Out of knights, the first time you play against knights at a tournament, you're like, oh wow, this is quite eye-opening. This is a very different kind of situation. So I think you kind of acquire those as you go, don't you? Okay, so pulling just a couple more out of the Discord, just check if there's any for Vic here. We've got from Pickalax, when do you decide you're done testing a certain list concept or combo? Tricky or less obvious combos might be the secret to unlocking an army's potential, but how can you tell the difference between something that has high potential but just needs practice versus something that's just convoluted and actually not very good? No. That's sort of like when is it sunk cost, right? When is it time to try something different? That's really interesting.
This is such a tough one, because you can create all these phenomenal combinations of units that are wildly powerful, but 40K has a points cost attached to everything. And I always find it very, very useful to go on TTS and say, here is my 4 or 5 units of my one big super unit, and this is all the other stuff I could get instead. And then just keep changing the things in the other stuff box until you're like, okay, now I can't really justify option A when option B is 7 units, Or, I've just cut these 2 characters out of this combination. Now I've got the base of that unit plus the bunch of other stuff on the side. That's an important part of optimization. And I think you should kind of test every powerful kind of hammer combination you have to see if it is actually justifiable for its points cost.
Completely. Yeah, I think that's a very, very valid point. We've got a question from Islife saying, if you were to build a list for Seer Council, where would you start and what data sheets would you be leveraging?
Oh god, I actually have not looked at Seer Council at all. So
you're not playing a teleporting Death Star with a D cannon in it, Vic? I don't
there
believe
you go,
it.
Tom.
Hello, 7th edition.
So actually, a shout out to one of my new mentees, Matt Elwood, who's been playing Seer Council. He came to me and he was like, I want to play Seer Council. I was like, that is the wrong choice, but we're going to make it work, and that is what we're doing. And actually, what I'd say about Seer Council so far is you've got 2 fundamental fun tools in here, which is a lone ops strat, an 18-inch lone up strat, and a teleporting strat. And essentially, and this is something we've been doing in the list design, one thing can really use this, right? You're going to get juice out of one unit with this. It's going to key off your psychers, but ultimately you're thinking, I'm teleporting a thing around and I'm protecting it with a lone up strat. So you want a good shooty thing in there. And it can be, there's this Death Star thing, which people are very excited about, which is like Guardians and a D cannon and a Bright Lance and a Farseer in there and all this stuff. That's a lot of points, and it's a weird mixed profile kind of thing. You could just be teleporting, Reapers around or something like that. So you have, I think there are what you want, and again, this is very Eldar, you want whatever that thing you're doing that to live for 5 turns. So you need a thing that's going to be useful to you for 5 turns from a long distance. So I think a good shooting unit there that you can teleport is very, very important. You're going to want characters, because a lot of the psychic characters are what all of the buffs and strats key off, so you need to keep them alive as well. So some conclaves or Farseers, etc. And we've got some ideas coming through. So John C says James Marsden's using MSU Wraith units and Wraith Lords. That's very interesting as well. So you've got some fun tech with the Wraiths there to give it a bit of solidity as well. So I think I guess that's where it's one of those detachments where things that just work across the Eldar book will serve you. Warp Spider's still great. Fire Dragons, you need to have a couple because everyone's taken the tanks out of their lists now. So you need to make that worth it for them by having a couple of Fire Dragon units, guys. Okay, otherwise it's just bullying. If you're not even running the Fire Dragons and you've made everyone drop all their tanks, that's just really, really mean. So you need to do that as well. And then, trash out the front, Rangers, Scorpions, whatever else as well, and Transport's still really, really useful. Really. Yeah, it's the same core, but it's just, I think the interplay is in that lone ops strat and that teleportation and the threat of that, which is going to be your sort of line clearer or later on your bully piece or whatever else as well.
So what you're saying is, rather than it being a cute unit that can do it in a weird way, just build on what the army does well anyway?
I think so. I think
because you can doesn't mean you should.
It's like, what am I going to get the most benefit out of doing those two things with? Those are the most powerful tricks as I see it in Seer Council. So you need to have a list that plays around it and recognize you probably only get one of those things. Because if you're like, I'll put both these out, that's bad times for the Eldar player, right? Because one of them, they can't both loan up, so that's a bad time.
And I would just say, I read the Seer Council strats properly the other day, and I was like, this is actually really nice.
I think it's a good detachment. It's a lot of fun.
And it's the same with every single detachment I read in that book. I keep rereading them and I get a chance. And it's like the Wind Rider one. The first time I read through the Wind Rider, I'm like, fun. This is insane. This is bonkers how powerful these strats are. You can do what? And no one is talking about Wind Rider. Because this is a classic thing of, you read it. Remember when Shining Spears... Though everyone saw those Shining Spears.
I definitely have a couple of boxes of them. I'm not going to be getting too very quickly.
Yeah. Everyone was like, that Shining Spear, that profile is
so cool.
Up, that is bullshit. What the hell? And then as soon as you put it on the table and you try and move it and hide it, you're like, okay.
It sticks out everywhere.
I guess it just dies before it does anything. And it's really interesting. If you gave anyone that set of Wind Rider stratagems, they'd be like gagging for it.
Can I have that on Ravenwing, please?
But they're insane, some of the things Wind Rider can do. That whole detachment is incredible, and yet Eldar players are like, well, I'm probably just a mid-table bully, mate. And,
that's true.
And it's so weird, isn't it? So weird.
And it's how it deals with the kinds of things people will be doing to deal with Eldar, right? And ultimately, it's less well placed to absorb some of that stuff. And that I think is ultimately my feeling on Seer Council. Although I'm a little bit more buoyant because I think it can do the absorb and play out quite well, and actually, it's got some quite fun tools for doing that. It's just ultimately it'll be whether the units you'd want to take in order to make that work, which is lots of the psychers, where that eats into your budget too much, and you actually just need other stuff. At the end of the day.
We all know it's Guardian with 120 Guardians and Dire Avengers and War Walkers. We all know that's the
Let's go. Shuriken, let's go.
Someone's got to have played it on TTS by now, surely.
I'm very surprised that Ed hasn't,
I'm really surprised.
Sure it can work.
Oh, very good, John.
But when I read that through, it's like, well, you just spam those bodies and it is eventually a huge amount of output with the right combos. Someone watching this must have tried it on TTS, right? And maybe they just got absolutely bodied and it doesn't work. But I'm sure
they don't talk about it. They're like, no.
Yeah, maybe it's
definitely viable. That archetype is definitely viable.
I think we all know that any sort of horde has the potential quite often to do well if it's enough bodies, and with all the movement tricks and that sort of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if some madman takes it and does quite well or something.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to selfishly finish with a question for Vic because I think it's our show. We can do what we want, and that is I've not spoken to you about the Eldar book since it came out, and how happy are you with it, and what's your kind of overall feeling about it as a long-time Eldar player with the book itself?
I think this is the best one.
Yes,
I think this is the best Eldar codex since I started playing 40K. You know, I think some of the community reaction was a little sad, like a little overreacting kind of things. But actually, you know,
No
putting it on the
way.
board and playing with it, it feels like how Eldar should feel when you play
Exactly
with
right.
it.
Exactly right.
I don't feel broken, but
No.
I feel like I'm gonna have to work really
Yeah.
hard to win my games. It's not like the
Yeah.
start of 10th edition.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying
Yeah,
to
I completely agree.
make the correct decisions at the right time with my massive Eldar brain.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just enjoyable. And I'm so glad that they chose the right kind of things, the things that people love about Eldar, the aspect warriors. They love, everyone loves them. That's such a cool concept. And for them to be the core staple of anyone's army that they bring makes a lot of sense and is really fun to use as well.
I can completely agree. Yeah, and playing against it is the exact mirror as what you say. It's like when you get hit, and you do get hit, there has been setup, there has been thought, it's been well timed. It's not, oh, my D cannon behind the wall just kills you anyway as you move across the board. Right? There were things which I think with the 10th index, which just felt very unnuanced in application, but this is not that. This is all the pieces have to move together, and when they line up, and you start to see how it's going to line up and be applied. It's really nicely done.
I'd add a comment for people playing against Eldar. So Eldar do this thing where, especially the new codex, where in the first 2 turns, it looks like there is no chance you are ever going to beat this army because it's everywhere, it's threatening every single space, and you can't avoid, it's inevitable. They are inevitable. But then when they actually do engage with you, you will find it's so satisfying that your close combat weapons, your bolt pistols, will each kill a 20-point model every time they shoot.
Yeah, grenade
in a way
strat
that you really don't get when you play against a lot of armies now, which will have multiple wounds, high toughness at the moment. It's very satisfying to chunk through Eldar armies. But so that means just be patient. Turn 3 and 4, you will be killing a lot of elves.
Yeah,
but
for
it'll be
sure.
too late.
No, it can be. It depends.
Late.
Yeah, no, I think it's on a timer. Yeah,
That's cool.
The pattern I have seen in the majority of games is turn 1 and 2, Eldar look broken. Turn 3 and 4, Eldar army dies. Turn 5 and 6, Eldar army are scrambling with their last few little pieces, and they either get a small win or a small loss. That's the
game. The games
pattern.
have all been phenomenally close, and I do just want it on record that someone on this show said this would be a balanced Eldar book, and I don't remember which one of us was that. Was it?
Someone kick him in the knee.
It was me.
Probably the bad one.
It was me, and I'm not saying it's 100% balanced, but I think they've done a better job with this than any of the others. I would definitely say that. I would completely agree.
And there's levers that if it is a little bit overtuned, like points, they can fix it. It sounds like it's not data sheets that you look at and go, well, that's cooked. I take 3 of them, which is nice from the get-go, right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. The only thing you're definitely going to see tons of is wave serpents, because by God, they need them. So it's fine.
It's an old kit. That's great.
No, it's a new kit now, right? They redid it.
It's got a new box.
It's got a new box.
It's a new box. Yeah, man. Yeah. I swear some of the pieces are different.
It says 2001 on the sprue still, I bet.
Does it?
I bet it does.
All right. We will be signing out, but before we go, Vic, one last chance just to plug Fireside and everything you're doing there.
Oh, amazing. Yes, thank you so much for that. Just like you guys should be carrying on to check out, subscribe, 6++, do take a moment to go and check 40K Fireside and see if any of the content, particularly the recent stuff, is something that you're interested in. We do tournament reports of every super major we go to, but more importantly than that, we try and talk about the strategy, list building, faction deep dives, looking at the meta as a whole. Just check out a couple of the videos. If it's something you like, make sure to subscribe to that as well. And our membership side has a lot more kind of detailed work as well.
Fantastic.
And shout out to I'm halfway through the battle report at the moment, the Eldar Guard battle report. And who's in control of the camera out of interest?
Dave's in control of the camera.
Okay,
and
Dave, I have control of the camera, mate. I don't know whether I watch it on a big TV, right? But he is, oh my word.
Is he all over the place?
Right?
The motion blur is on your TV
when I'm
as
on
well.
TTS, you are just naturally fiddling with the camera.
Yeah.
But Dave is like, my poor eyes. However, it's been genuinely really interesting to hear how you guys talk aloud your thought processes. And just there have been some little things I kind of just picked up from hearing how you both are just talking about what you're trying to achieve and why. And I think those are what make the best learning things. Like when I know when I first got into the hobby and I was all about the tabletop tactics life and that sort of thing, and that was entertainment and we all loved B-Bone, etc. But it wasn't really a learning opportunity. And that was one of the big things I looked for when I started making our battle reports, was I want to talk about the thought processes. And you guys are doing an amazing job of doing that. But obviously at an even higher level, and I think people will learn a lot from that, and just hearing how the matches are being approached and why you're doing what you're doing and what the macro and what the micro is and that sort of thing. So hopefully you definitely carry on to do those.
Yeah, exactly. They're amazing, and there is no way you go over there and don't learn something you're glad you learned, so go and do it. All right, everybody, that's it from us. Nice, bubbly list writing episode for you. Hey, it's a lot less complicated now. We don't have to adjust our weapon prices and all those things as well, right? So, thanks for tuning in, guys. We will see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.